Welcome, everyone. Tonight, we're going to talk about becoming a cloud architect projects, and cloud architecture projects, because every day somebody's asking me about projects. And see, the key is, there's cloud computing projects for beginners, and there's AWS Solution Architect projects, and cloud career projects, but all these careers are so different. And it's the relevance of the cloud projects that you're trying to do. Azure cloud projects and AWS cloud projects, they're a start, but they may be 3% of what you really need to do. Or in some cases, they're all of what you need to do. And it's truly based upon the career that you actually desire. And that's why we're here. Out of nowhere, I've been receiving resumes coming at me from all over the world. And there's a section on cloud projects. And I've thrown every resume away. And I've spoken to other employers, and they're doing the same thing. So the key is, I want you to know how to use projects to build your career, the right cloud projects for a cloud architect career, projects that build your cloud architecture skills. So this is going to be a really good discussion between me and Elonzo. We'll answer your questions. This topic is so important that invite your friends, send a tweet, send a quick email, or make a quick LinkedIn post and say, come here. Because if you're serious about building a cloud computing career, a solution architect career, an enterprise architect career, a cloud architect career, this is a really important topic. Now, our focus is on cloud architects, but we will still talk about cloud engineering projects at some point for the people that are interested in the cloud engineering space, because we have to understand what matters and why it matters. So keep that in the back of your mind. I'm here with Elonzo Coleman. He's my Chief Marketing Officer. And when we talk about projects, marketing matters too. And while I've got a lot of experience working in product marketing and the such, Lonzo's got 32 years marketing executive experience. He's our Chief Marketing Officer. So, when it comes down to it, the whole situational leadership, pass the baton to the best person for the right skills, that's going to be Elonzo when we talk about marketing. So, Elonzo, you want to say anything to kick it off?
Oh, absolutely, Mike. Again, thank you, everyone, for joining us. I see everyone, Canada, Australia. We have people down in South Africa. I mean, everyone is here, and it's just a really, really great privilege to have a time to you guys blocking off your schedules, whether you're in the morning, afternoons, or evening, and you're sitting down and you're getting all this awesome and relatable and valuable content about being a cloud architect. So, as Mike said, I have a long list of years of devoting myself to not only marketing, but also to cloud architecture as well. And we are definitely excited about giving you an understanding of how brand and what questions are going to be pivotal and relatable to becoming a cloud architect. So let's get at it, Mike.
Sounds great. So welcome. We're going to start this out. Alonzo's going to ask me some questions. And in certain cases, I'm going to actually ask him to respond to the questions as well and add his perspective. And then we'll take your questions from the audience.
Awesome. So you ready to go with the first question, Mike?
I'm always ready to go.
All right. Okay. So I am very interested, and I'm sure our audiences are too, of the first question would be, what do employers care about and what don't they care about?
Elonzo, I'm really glad you asked this question. And here's the thing. Whether it comes to getting your first cloud architect job, getting promoted to a distinguished or principal architect role, or moving up into management, employers do care about a few things. So let's talk about what they care about and what they don't care about. Your employer does not care about any certifications you have. They don't care about any degrees that you have. They don't care if you've got a list of things that is 1,000 miles long that you've done. What they care about is the following: how good you are at your job, the job at hand. And why do I say this? Because in tech, we've got a lot of people that learn everybody else's job. And when we interview them, we can't hire them because they don't know the job. The next things that they really care about, and this is so important, the ability to do your job and do it well is 50%. But what if I hire somebody and bring them on my team and they're so negative that they ruin the energy of the team? It doesn't matter how good they are. I can't hire that person. So employers care about the following: can I trust this person? Prove that to them when you interview with them, and prove it every single day. If you say you're going to do something, do it on time, on budget. And if you can't for some reason, find a way to make it clear. So build that name and reputation. They care about you actually being self-aware. Imagine if you had a pilot, for example, that said, I can fly any plane, and the only thing they flew was a Cessna. And then they walked into a 747 with 300 people on it and couldn't fly it, and the plane crashed. Well, as bad as that sounds, I see it every day in tech. I know how to do this, but they don't. So employers care that you know what you know and know what you don't know. Now, what else do employers seriously care about? Your energy, enthusiasm, and passion, because if you walk in there happy and positive, you bring out the best in others. And guess what? Me, Alonzo, and Chris together, we're like 10 people because we each do stuff to each other to bring out the best in each other. Me and Alonzo, we're probably 5 people. By myself, I'm just one person. So Alonzo and I aren't just 2 people together. It's what we bring out of each other, the synergy that makes us so great. So employers are looking for that energy, enthusiasm, and passion. And Alonzo's not sleeping through the day. I can tell you that, and neither am I. The next thing people care about, and we're going to get to the projects in a minute, but I want you to get into the mind of the employer so you understand how to press them. They care about your emotional intelligence. Do you make people feel good in your presence? Alonzo knows more about marketing than any 10 marketing executives that I'll ever meet in my life. But if I told Alonzo that he looked bad today, or he's going to be upset, and he's not going to be creative and think about anything, for example. Likewise, Alonzo wouldn't tell me I looked bad before I got on camera, because it wouldn't be good for me being on camera. So the key is people want those really seeking, emotionally intelligent people. Now, the last things that people want, especially today, at a time where employee productivity is so bad because people aren't doing their jobs, that employers are saying, you better come back to the office. It's really sad. I've been working home from 20 years, but people just aren't working. And you can look at the labor productivity rates. They're the worst they've been in so long. They're worse than they were during COVID. And employers are saying, come back to the office. So they want team players and people that are willing to go above and beyond. When it comes to a cloud architect career, or an AWS solution architect career, or an enterprise architect career, we are not people by ourselves. These are big team activities, and it's all about the entire team. So that's what employers care about. Now, you get 10 master's degrees, they don't care. You get a PhD, they don't care. You get 18,000 certifications, they don't care. They care about those other things. Now, some of those things aren't a bad thing. I love when people get extra degrees. It shows commitment to me. Somebody gets a CCIE certification, it shows that they're serious about learning their networking. I get it. So it's not that we don't like it, it's that you can have all of that and we still don't care. And you can be the best at your job in the entire world and we still don't care unless you can do all those other things at the same time.
All right. That sounds great, Mike. I'm thankful for that. So I'm looking and to focus on that next level of question, or that would be, why do you have to be selective with your projects?
Okay, and that's really a great question, Alonzo. And here's the reason why. The right projects will teach you something about your job. The wrong projects will not. And the right projects will build your brand and make you look like you're ready for the job. And the wrong projects will make you look like you're not ready for the job. So let's talk about these kind of things and what makes sense. I'm going to be a doctor, right? And if I'm a doctor, what am I going to do? I'm going to meet with the patient. I'm going to examine them. I'm going to make a diagnosis and a treatment plan. If my projects include airplane flying, and I'm trying to apply to the University of Pennsylvania Medical Center, one of the best hospitals in the country, actually the world, and they say, you got lots of projects flying an airplane, Mike. How's that going to make you a better doctor? It won't. And they're going to look at me like I don't even know what a doctor is. And they're going to say, Mike, if you think this is medicine, flying an airplane, get out of here. So there's that. So let's first talk about learning. We have to look at what people do in their actual job. The cloud architect, the AWS Solutions Architect, the enterprise architect, we don't touch the technology. Not now, not ever. We're not even allowed. And there's reasons why, and we'll talk about that for a minute. But we design a solution. So what do we have to do as an architect? We've got to go to our client. We've got to ask the key stakeholders at our client, C-suite executives, for example, about their business goals, pain points, and challenges. We've got to go to the VPs and ask them about what's going on. The directors, the frontline managers, even the frontline workers, and figure out what's going on in that business. What are the business goals, business pain points, and business challenges? If we're a really good architect, and I know I will do it on every single time, I will pretend to be a customer of the business. I want to see what it's like to buy something from the business, to walk through the halls of the business, because we've got to understand that business. At that point, once we've asked the right questions, we've got to go build and lead a team of people to design it. And here's the key. No one person is ever going to design this. And here's why. To let you know the depth that it takes to be really great at these jobs, when I did my Cisco Certified Internet Expert exam, it was 75,000 pages of reading to pass that exam. Now, that was routing and switching. You know what it didn't include? Wireless. You know what it didn't include? Security. Do you know what it didn't include? Voice. Just routing and switching. Just IP-based. So BGP, OSPF, EIGRP, IGRP, RIP. And spanning tree. And that was it. That was an entire exam in 75,000 pages. That's the kind of depth that it takes to be really good at these things. And, that was my job. So if it takes that much to truly learn these things, and now we're in the cloud. Now we've got the routing and switching still in the cloud. Now we've got the data center stuff in the cloud, the servers, the containers, the storage area and networks, the load balancers. Now we've got the business applications, the ERP applications, the CRM applications, unified communications applications, supply chain applications. Now we've got security, firewalls, intrusion detection, intrusion prevention systems, authentication systems, encryption. The list goes on. We are now talking about 10 different people's careers to truly know this, 15 people's different careers. So the architect can't really design anything that's going to be meaningful or transformational by themselves. They're going to have to reach out to other subject matter experts and other vendors. For example, if I consult with a bank as a cloud architect, I'm going to be speaking to Azure. I'm going to be speaking to AWS. I'm going to be speaking to Google. I'm going to be speaking to F5. I'm going to be speaking to Dell. I'm going to be speaking to Microsoft. I'm going to be speaking to OpenStack, Nutanix, Palo Alto, Fortinet, just to name a few. And I'm going to be dealing with a lot more vendors. So I've got to now, as an architect, manage all those vendors, collect their information, and integrate the team to design this thing. Now, when I've spoken to these vendors for the next 6 months to design my solution, I've now to go write this 500-page document up. And the good news is I'm going to lead a team to go build this document. It's now going to have to go to document reviewers. It's now going to have to go to a graphics team to make it look real pretty. And then I've got to go build a presentation of the client. I've got to speak to their executives who speak one language. I've got to speak to the management team who speak a different language. I've got to go bring in somebody to talk to the engineers unless I talk to the engineers in their language. And then I got to go help the sales team negotiate this thing. And then once that's gone and they say, yes, I am gone, I am out of there, I am never going to touch that technology. So understand that is the role. And you can only learn that by training that. That is the role. So if I've got projects, cloud architect projects that build those skills, now we're in the sweet spot. And we'll talk about that. If it's related to documentation, yeah, an RFI, RFP, RFQ, great. And we will talk about the right cloud architect projects, but I want you to understand that that is our job. So if you've got a Python coding project, you know what that shows me? You don't even know what an architect is, and again, I can't hire you. If you're doing work on Linux systems, unless it's the right kind of work, guess what? If you've got too many of those listed in your resume, again, you're showing me you're not an architect. Because why would a doctor put down flying an airplane on their resume? If you have Terraform or Git, you ask 1,000 architects what Git is, they wouldn't even know how to pull a GitHub repository in their life because it's not what they do. So now somebody sticks all these silly things, which are very important things for somebody else's career, under architect experience. The hiring manager looks at this, they see a piece of paper coming in, and they're like, what the heck is this? This is no architect. And they toss the paper in the trash. Or if it's in their inbox, they delete it. Although a lot of us actually print it out because it's quicker for us to look at it and we can see it better on paper. So kind of keep that in the back of your mind. That's there. So I'm going to ask Elonzo about building a brand, but the stronger your brand, the easier it is for your customers to know who it is. Who's your customer? The hiring manager. The more clear your brand is, the more you're worth. The more scattered your brand is, the less your work. So let's look at about brands that are scattered. Nobody knew what Sears was or Kmart. What are they? Was Sears a hardware store? Were they selling appliances? Were they selling lawnmowers? Were they selling clothes? Was it low end, medium end, high end? Were they selling shoes? Were they selling sporting goods? Nobody knew. You just didn't know.
Yeah.
But McLaren Motors, it's pretty clear what they make. Really fast cars. So the better the brand. Look at Apple. It's clear what they make. Under Armour. I love Under Armour. Athletic gear, right? It's clear what they make. Lululemon. They're a fortune. They're like, I had a friend, and if it was her birthday, I was like looking at this person. I was thinking yoga pants. I didn't know they were like $140. But guess what? Their brand was so strong, I was willing to pay it because the person wanted it so much. So, kind of keep that in the back of your mind. You've got to have a clear brand. So, Elonzo, if you got something from 15 different careers, what's that going to do to a person's brand?
It's a hodgepodge. It's mixed salad is what it is. And it's like, okay, if I want something specific, imagine this. If you love croutons in your salad, hypothetically, and I want croutons, but you present to me a tossed salad. Now I got to pick what I'm looking for out of you and somehow gather this information to make you into something I want you to be. I'm not going to do that. I've got 5,000 other resumes I got to pick through. I got to figure out how to sit through that. Who's going to best meet the parameters that I'm looking for that person? So you're going to be an automatic pass. So focusing on what you want to do and how to represent yourself as that person is key. If you're focused on security, then focus on CISSP, focus on certified ethical hacking, focus on these things that exemplify you. If it doesn't have security in it, then how do I know you're focused on security? So make sure, I don't want you to say that you're an architect, and this is some reality and a bit of some tough medicine that I might have to administer as an unofficial doctor, is if you have practitioner, a cloud engineer, admin, architect, machine learning, security, certifications all lined up, I don't know what you are.
Right.
Are you doing this? Are you doing that? So the whole overall focus, just like you gather the things that you need to become a serious applicant, you gather your professional gear, you make sure you're well groomed, you make sure all of these things come into play because you want to exemplify something, right? The same thing with your career, the same thing with your trajectory, your development trajectory. It's so key. So making sure that everything matches and aligns, just like you want to not have polka dots with stripes, or you don't want to wear a green sports jacket with purple pants. You want to make sure everything's aligned. So keep that in the back of your mind with how you focus on your development.
Elonzo, I really love that. If you're going to go to a fancy black tie affair, don't put a baseball cap on. It ruins the whole thing.
Yeah.
And that's really the thing. And we will cover the projects a little bit, but we need you to know why and why our position's different. Well, first, we've been architects for decades, and we give people cloud architect jobs every single day of the week. But why is it that some people, like our students, we have one didn't even graduate high school, and he's working at JP Morgan Chase. Love this kid. Right. Honestly, wish he was my own son sometimes because I admire him so much. But he was so great that employers didn't care. No degrees, no experience. It didn't matter. But at the same time, we get people with 20 years experience, and they've got resumes that are littered with everything, and employers will just pass. So that's why we're going over this, because I want you to understand that I want really great careers for all of you guys. And I've been in this world since the architect career even began, before we even called architects. Those were fun days. I've got a video on that one coming out for you guys soon. Yeah. So let's go to the next question, Elonzo.
Okay. So I guess my question is, we may have touched on that a little bit based on the conversation, but we need everyone to understand your position in why you can't learn architecture by doing hands-on projects.
Elonzo, that's a great question you asked, and I'm so happy you did. So in engineering, we work on what's in front of us. For example, if I was a cloud engineer and I would configure an S3 bucket, it would be valid experience. If I was a cloud engineer and I set up a Linux system and I started setting up some cron tab things, that would be valuable experience for an engineer. If I was a network engineer and I went to the router and I typed config t router BGP 65312, neighbor 192.168, remote AS 65313, and I added a network statement, network 10.0.0.0, mask 255.2550, that would make sense. Oh, I think I need the neighbor and then the activate statement to bring up that BGP peering session. That's engineering, and that teaches you what's in front of you. But architects don't work practically. As architects, we don't touch the technology. We're not even allowed to touch our customers' technology, because the second we do, we lose focus. But architecture is different. Architecture is about the cloud engineer is going to make a change to a virtual router in Japan. How does that affect the voice system, the unified communications that's in London? How does it affect the supply chain that's in Hong Kong? And how does that affect a website which is hosted in New York City? That's architecture. It is if you were to drop a stone in the water, for example, and it ripples and you can see the waves, architecture is about the entire system. And when you configure a router in Japan, you can't see what's going on to Elonzo's desktop in Katy, Texas, but the architect needs to see that. So the architect is all theory. It's all about, how does this thing work? And how does this thing affect this thing, which affects this thing, which affects this thing, which affects this thing? That's architecture. And with engineering, you can't see it because it's the whole sky. So if you looked up tonight and you saw the whole sky, that's architecture. And maybe you would plan a flight for a rocket ship to go see the entire sky. That would be architecture. Where engineering would be the guy working on the moon with a drill trying to see what's in the center of the moon. It's just different focus. Mm-hmm. So, as an engineer, you focus on, how do I make this Linux system strong? How am I disabling the unnecessary packages? How am I installing the host-based firewall? How am I installing them? Mm-hmm. The architect is focused on, why do we need this? So let's say we're dealing with a security architect. What are the training needs of the people? When I started asking people to find out what their gaps are. This person I flirted with at the front desk, and she gave me her password. Okay, I need to do some anti-social engineering training. This guy, I sent him a phishing link and he clicked on it. Okay, I need to do some anti-phishing training. Wait, my users are coming from this country. For this country, I can't use this encryption, so how do I secure this? For a security architect, they're thinking about, well, I'm in the banking industry. I have these regulations. How do I comply to these regulations? See, that's architecture. Engineering is focused on, how do I configure the rules on the firewall? And configuring the rules on the firewall does not teach you how to roam around the halls and assess people's skills. That's why these engineering hands-on projects don't work for architects. How does the new electronic health record, for example, that a hospital is going to adopt, change the way the nurses work? How does it change the way the doctors work? How does it change the way the hospital admits new patients to the hospital? If the patients come in slower, what does that do in terms of admissions? How does that affect the organization's finances? See, these are architecture topics. And that's why the architect is a special person. They need to know, not like the engineers, how to build it or how to configure it. They need to know how it works. And the reason they need to know how it works, because, for example, if you understand video is sensitive to variations in latency called jitter, and you understand that video is susceptible to packet loss, and you understand that video is IP multicast, the architect could then think, okay, it's susceptible to jitter. Okay, I need this kind of wide area network versus this kind of wide area network. Okay, video's IP multicast. Wait, I'm using cloud computing. Cloud computing doesn't support multicast. Okay, maybe I need to run a GRE tunnel through the cloud and run my IGP through the cloud and run PIM sparse mode across the GRE tunnels in the cloud. See, that's architecture. It's not how do I set up a GRE tunnel, that's engineering. It's knowing that you need those GRE tunnels. And no matter how much you write code or a Python script, it's not going to teach you the implications of what this thing does to the people, processes, or technology. The rest of it, which is even the other reason this doesn't work, for the architecture to do their job, they don't need to know the cloud systems, a cloud architect. They need to know all those systems in the data center and all those traditional network systems, because they have to move the stuff to the cloud. So doing a Git project, nothing for the cloud architect. Setting up a Linux system, nothing for the cloud architect. Making a CloudFormation script or a Terraform script or an Azure Bicep thing, meaningless for the architect, because it's not our job. It's about as bad as a doctor putting down airplane flying on their resume. It just doesn't teach you. So we will talk about projects that do work, but understand that's why engineering projects will teach you nothing about architecture. That's why we've got people with 20 years engineering experience that are strong. We've got people in a database that, I mean, they really know a database. And I'm going to tell you right now, they're going to know that database 100 times deeper than any cloud architect would, because they're working on the database. The cloud architect is working on the big picture.
Awesome, Mike. Awesome. I have a couple of other questions that I think that you might be interested in as well. So I was also thinking about how you position your brand, but also I'm wondering from your perspective, how do you position your projects?
So how do you position your projects? It's going to be there. So for example, you know, these are careers for the most part you can't learn on your own, and you're going to need somebody to position them. I'll tell you what you could do on your own, and I'll tell you what I recommend. Okay. If you're with an organization that can truly train you, they can give you appropriate projects for your career, and you can do them under them. So we have a student that goes to Go Cloud Careers, and they're designing a multi-cloud environment. They can pop that project underneath it. We've got a student that's designing and building their own cloud. They can put that under Go Cloud Careers, for example. So by having a company that they're doing it under, now it looks like real job experience. And that's the whole point, is you're trying to show competency. If you're not, now you got a problem. Putting a project section on your resume really turns employers off. So, you know, that's why we created exactly what we do with creating those kinds of internships for our students, to do those projects under an internship so the employers can see it as a legitimate organization, and the students are legitimately doing the exact work that an architect would do. If you're not, you could probably take a career break, training and development, or put a career research and development section. And it's not going to be great, but it's still better than a project. I think I'd probably call it a technology professional development. And under that, I'd put speeches that I would give, for example, if I was giving speeches, and articles that I would write for magazines in there, cloud projects that I would do. But I'd create some kind of professional development, something or other, and make it look like a job. Because just projects turn me off. They turn every other hiring manager I've ever spoken to. And I ask them, what do you think of projects? And it's like, why are people putting projects on the resume? It's like, do they also want to put their yoga sequence on the resume? They want to put their bench press on the resume? And that's the impression that the hiring managers speak to when I actually speak to these things. So kind of keep that in the back of your mind.
Okay. So in essence, like a project, it's not valuable because it was created in a vacuum. It's not applicable to real world experiences. So we don't have an idea if it worked, if it didn't work. If it didn't work, what were your pain points? What were your KPIs? What were your statistics? And although some people can't even telegraph who the company that they did this for, hypothetically, it doesn't really prove the knowledge. It only gives that impression that perhaps all you know how to do is fill in those potential blanks, because there's never been any resistance or any real world endpoints that, because if everyone who realizes they understand that no plan survives the first encounter. So I think that's very poignant to what you were talking about. But I have one other question that I was thinking about while we're discussing.
Sure.
Is what kind of project should people do then?
I'm going to first start with the cloud architect. And I'm actually going to go into cloud engineering projects, which is a completely separate career. Now, before I do this, please do not confuse a cloud architect and a cloud engineer.
No.
They're about as different as an airplane pilot and a doctor.
Yeah.
Elonzo can tell you, I've got people with 20 years experience in my cloud architect career development program, and they struggle at least as much as someone that's brand new. And the reason is it's a completely different career, and being an engineer taught you how to think like an engineer, which is exactly the opposite thinking. Now, that does not mean that I don't love having engineers, because when we get an engineer with a deep technical depth and we translate them and turn them into an architect, they're awesome and they've got more technical depth. Likewise, when I get someone who's a doctor, for example, or a sales rep, ooh, they've got a lot of those people skills, which are so desired as an architect. They just need to learn the tech. And the job of an architect and a doctor are much more related than other jobs. So let's talk about it. So if, for example, and I had a student that did so recently, I had a student that wrote about the partnership between Epic, which is an electronic health record company, and Microsoft and ChatGPT, how that can change healthcare. Wow, that was a really good one. Why did I really like it? What is the cloud architect's job? Digital transformation. So this was an example of an architect tying the various pieces of technology together to solve a business problem. And he did a real good job with it. I was very proud of him for doing this. Another project is we write books with our students. By doing so, we get our students published as cloud computing authors. Now that's a cloud project, to have a cloud book published by another organization. That's a cloud project, and it's helped many of our students. We actually have our students build a cloud from scratch. And any of you can do this. You could take our course, or you could spend about $1,500 on a server, a Xeon system with about 16 cores, 120 gigs of RAM, and 3 SSDs, and a RAID 0 environment, or an NVMe RAID, or you could just take our training and actually learn to be an architect and have the tech at the same time, whichever. But build a cloud. And even though we architects don't really touch the technology, the depth of knowledge you have when you've created your own cloud. See, other people are learning how to configure the tech, and you're designing a cloud. All my students build their own cloud. And that way, when most people don't even know what a cloud is, I've interviewed like 500 AWS certified solution architect professionals. Not a single one actually understood what the cloud was. And when you're building a cloud, it makes your students go, people go, wow. And when you've got that kind of knowledge of how a cloud is built from scratch, you can really explain that. How about a blog? What does the cloud architect do? Design, present, and sell a technology solution. So somebody writes a blog, and not a blog that said, I learned this today. If you write that, you're showing me, the hiring manager, that I should never touch you because you don't know anything. You just learned it today. But please don't do that. I'm begging you, please don't do this. I see other people doing it. Now, if you're writing a blog that says, I know how to set up a WordPress website, and you're an architect who does not touch the technology, that's not going to work for you at all. But if you were to write an article about some new AI technology and how this new AI technology will improve business performance, how this new AI technology can enable faster software velocity development, the velocity of software development, how this new AI can be integrated to prevent hacking attempts, how this new AI could be integrated for you to run some penetration testing on a business. Now you're showing, how the pieces and parts together. If you're showing why an organization can't do a single cloud, if you're showing the business imperative behind a super cloud, or if you are writing a document on why something like a VMware like a VMware on the AWS cloud might be attractive to business, that's there. Now, for example, VMware on AWS, what does it do? It uses the same VMware we've used for the last 20 years, but organizations maybe don't have enough people that know how to configure the cloud. So they have their own data center. They stick VMware, for example, on AWS, VMware on Azure. Now their people don't have to learn any cloud stuff. It's doing the same good thing they've done, but gaining the scalability of the cloud with the same people without retraining. So you could talk about that. Likewise, there's a little cloud provider that has 1% of the entire cloud computing market right now. And they're saying you can run our cloud software specifically on AWS. But guess what? That doesn't solve a problem, because there's about 10 times more people that know AWS than know this little tiny cloud provider. So that's creating a worse problem. So write a document about that. Talk about, why software-defined networking is a better WAN than a private line versus for example, VPN. What is network as a service? What are the weaknesses and strengths behind networking as a service? Because there are both. SASE. Why is SASE a good security solution? What are its weaknesses? If you use SASE, how do you back up SASE? How about disaster recovery environments? I've been seeing people write all kinds of ridiculous things. In the AWS well-architected framework, they teach you to do disaster recovery in the same cloud. It's mind-boggling. No company would be crazy enough to do that. They'd back up to a separate cloud. Now, it's in their best financial interest to suck up all your business and keep you on the cloud. But if I'm on the AWS cloud, I'm backing up to Google or Azure or somebody else. I'm not going to back up to myself. That's a really good idea. Here, everything that matters, all your money, all your paperwork, stick it in your house. Call it disaster recovery. And if you have a row house or a townhouse, put it in the house next to you. So when your house burns down, your neighbor does. It doesn't make sense. So ask yourself when you do a project, is it related to the job? What if you put out a guide on how to respond to an RFI, RFP, or an RFQ? Again, that's a cloud architect thing. We respond to RFIs, RFPs, RFQs. How can AI enable you to respond to an RFI, RFP, or an RFQ? Again, that's in our job. I mean, as an architect, I'm going to tell you, it's been 25 years. I've never coded and I've never touched the tech. Well, that's not true. One time I tried to touch the tech 25 years ago. My employer said, if you do this again, you're fired. Architects don't touch the customer's technology. So that was the closest I came 25 years ago to touching the tech. But there's not been a day in 25 years where I didn't give a presentation, write a document, take a client to lunch, buy a client drinks, schmooze, convince internal management that we needed to do things, do something called the demand generation event, where you're basically presenting at a conference and bringing other people in. These are the jobs. So how about a speech you gave somewhere? A persuasive speech to convince somebody of the technology. That's an architect project. So you may need some help. You may need an organization to do these kind of projects with you, but I hope you understand why these projects are so beneficial for your career, because what are they doing? First, they're actually teaching you the right skills, the exact skills. And secondly, they're contributing to your brand. These are things that people see on your resume. Somebody applies for a job. I don't look at their certifications, but I will tell you, if they have more than 3, unless they're an engineer, because I give engineers more, but if it's more than 3, I assume their focus is spread across 3 things. Ignore the resume. I will tell you that. Yeah. But if I do see like a CCIE, for example, I do like that, because I know that that person had to really fight to get that CCIE. It's not like they were going to self-study with a couple of Udemy things and think they knew something. They were going to read 50,000 plus pages. They were going to put in hundreds of hours of time to pass that exam. That shows me something. So there are certifications for which I seek commitment, which I do value. But even still, as a CCIE can tell you, and here's the thing where people don't get it when they get certified, and there's another CCIE in this chat. And if you agree with me, Mark, pop it in the chat box. If you don't agree with me, you don't have to. When I was, the CCNA is 2,000 pages, so it's about 4 times more than the AWS Certified Solution Architect Professional. When I passed that exam, Elonzo, I went, woohoo, I know networking. And then I became a Cisco Certified Networking Professional. And that was about 10,000 pages of reading. And when I got done that, I went, I think I know networking. And then after that, I did the CCIA. I'm now a Cisco Certified Internet Expert. Back on as a 2-day exam. My number is 7417. And I went, oh my God, there's so much that I don't know.
Yeah.
And then that was the start of my networking career, which led into my architecture career. That's when I realized, oh my God, I'm finally learning.
Yeah. That's how I feel. It's amazing. It's like saying, I know animals. What kind of animal? Is it a mammal? Is it a fish? Is it a reptile? Is it an insect? Is it an arachnoid? Is it flying? Is it avian? Is it a mammal? That, you know, is it a bat? I mean, it's like then you break down those sub animals, those genus, as okay. Is it a wolf? What type of wolf? Where does it live? What does it eat? I mean, you can't drill down enough to know it all. It's impossible, and that's why we laugh all the time when they're asking for all this experience with, you know, even though it's totally inaccurate, Kubernetes, Jenkins, and this hodgepodge of stuff that has nothing to do with the other about how to become a successful architect. So it really lends to you talking about focusing on what's important to get you where you want to be for the right job.
And Mark popped in the chat box. Mark is so good.
Hey, Mark.
That, I mean, I actually asked him to help teach networking to our students because Mark is so good.
Yeah.
Like, he's the guy that I'd hire in a second. He's incredible in so many different ways. And but I'm sure he's got his own happy job. But I'm just saying he's that good that if I could have him on my team more than like, here, teach this class here and there, I definitely would, because he's that good. And he said the same thing. After passing the CCI, I realized how little he actually knew.
Yeah.
And that's where there is. So that's a cloud architect thing. Now, a cloud engineer, by comparison, does the exact opposite job of the architect. For the cloud engineer, doing work on Linux is good because they will be doing it in their job. For the cloud engineer, working on Terraform is great. For the cloud engineer, writing a Python script is great because it's in their field. For the cloud engineer, doing hands-on building is great because it's in their field. So it's about doing the right projects. A nurse and a doctor are both in healthcare, but a nurse just can't go to become a doctor without going to medical school because it's a different thinking. It's a different process. Believe me, I've done both. I was a nurse, and then I was a nurse practitioner, which does medicine. And it was really good. I didn't work as a nurse before I became a nurse practitioner. When I went to school, most of them were nurses with 20 years experience that were trying to get out of nursing and move into another career. I was a nurse for 3 months and I went, this is terrible. I don't want to touch this. I'm never doing this again. So I became a nurse practitioner, me and my friend Trang. We went through school. It was nothing for us. We got out of school. We were both hired while we were still in school. But the nurses we went to school with, which had 20 years experience, struggled. Because when somebody asked them to do medicine, they were trying to do nursing. Because they had such patterned experience in somebody else's job. They had a better foundation for us because they had experience. But they were so experienced doing somebody else's job that now it's time to think about, okay, they came in. What's the actual problem? What prescription I'm going to write them? And they were trying to talk to them. And they were trying to do all these other things that were medicine. And, you know, that's the key is you got to think like the career. So the projects need to be there. So I'm sure I made a lot of people have a lot of questions.
Yeah. Yeah. Let's hear about the questions and bring them to the floor. Now, this is an opportunity that we always have, that we always, we always encourage people to join us here and consider it kind of like focused on office hours based on our subject, because we don't really have a lot of time to focus based on our very busy schedules. We're training, we're trying to get people onboarded, we're trying to get and help solve problems and so forth, along with this awesome team. So please don't be shy. This is where we come here because we want to have that opportunity to answer them in a public forum. So fire away, ask them, and we're looking forward to giving you those answers. So are there any questions we have out there, Tyrone? Okay, this is from Fola Shaki. Why aren't engineers respected by leadership?
Fola, this is a really interesting question, and it's a hard question for me to answer because I feel so bad about it. So let's describe this. If you're a leader, you're focused on one thing. You're focused on, let's say you're a CXO leader, like a CEO, CFO, Chief Marketing Officer. They're focused on the business. In order for the business people to truly do their job, they have certain things they think about. They have their business acumen, they've got their leadership skills, they've got their communication skills, and their world is surrounded by the people who truly impact their business. Engineers are 100% focused on the tech. They're techies, they love it. And they're 100% focused on the tech. So it's like a 40-year-old parent that's focused on their 401k and their kids watching Instagram Reels all day long. And the parents thinking, why isn't my kid worried about graduating college with a 4.0 and going to medical school or law school and having a career? Why are they focused on their Instagram Reels videos of somebody doing butt exercises, for example? And I see this because, I was at the gym the other day and people were watching videos of that. And I went, okay, so there's that. So the business is focused on one thing, the engineers are that. The engineers have kind of shot themselves in the foot by not focusing on people. Many engineers are all in their head, and I love engineers because we've got nothing without it. So they're focused on how do I be a great coder. But the rest of the people are focused on how do I build a team. And what happens is, the leadership are focused on the business. The engineers are focused on the tech. If a CEO doesn't care what code's running on their systems, they have no idea. They don't care. They don't care whose routers they have. They don't care whose firewalls they are. They just don't care. So they're looking at those engineers in much the same way that a hotel guest would at the maid that's cleaning the room. Now, I have lots of respect for the maids that are cleaning the room. But to them, tech is just, the executive tech is this thing that we just sort of have to deal with because we can't run our business without it. And the engineers are focused on that. So how does an engineer get more respect? And I've helped engineers get more respect and add an extra $100,000 to their income. They do the following. Instead of getting a bunch of certifications and 50 people's careers, they master their career. You take that engineer, you give that engineer some business training, you give that engineer some soft skills training, you give that engineer some CXO relevancy training, you give that engineer some executive presence, you train that engineer in emotional intelligence, and that engineer, Folashaki, is not hiding behind a desk anymore. That engineer is now a distinguished engineer with a $350,000 salary, presenting to executives about how this technology can affect their business. Effectively, that engineer becomes something that's very similar to an architect, a professional of both tech and business and people domains, and that's the thing. So it doesn't matter really what you're at. Folashaki, I was a paramedic for many years. That's how I paid my way through college. Mm-hmm. Nobody respected us. The nurses thought we were just, the techs that stuck an IV in somebody. The doctors treated us like we were trained in 9 months, which we were, and they didn't respect us. And when I'd go to pick up somebody in their house because they dial 911, people would bring down sheets over the carpets because they didn't want us in our dirty boots to dirty their carpets. Now, we save patients' lives every day, and I will not take back any minute of being a paramedic, even though I've got a lentil herniated disc for it. I can think of the people's lives that I've saved, and I treasure it every minute. I worked with my wife as a paramedic. It was a wonderful job, but I got no respect as a paramedic. And guess what? I got no respect as an engineer either. Now, once I got past engineering and started studying the business, the leadership, the sales skills, the soft skills, the executive presence, my salary tripled and the respect I got tripled. So the reality is people respect and like people that are like themselves. And the more you are like someone, the more they tend to like you and respect you. So it's not that the engineers are less. The engineers are amazing, super smart, wonderful people. I love engineers. But it's the engineer's relevance to the executive that causes that lack of respect.
And you know what I'm thinking also as well is that maybe the respected by leadership may not be exactly accurate per se, as the leaders are focused on business. They're focused on generating money. And when you go down into the weeds about this technology, its feature work and the ability to connect using code, they are not that mismatch between understanding that value of what engineers bring to the table. It doesn't directly connect with how is it going to make them money. Now, I'll take it back to my years old younger career as a creative director years ago. And say, for instance, we have leaders, or say, for instance, Mike is looking for ads that generate money, generate brand, generate attraction to what the company is offering. But I'm talking to him as an artist. Well, I used a certain color and a certain artistic style dating back to this origin and this particular artist, he's not going to care. Is this application, is what you're doing going to make me money? And unfortunately, that miscommunication right there is why I don't think you perceive that engineers aren't being respected. It's just that the money piece is on the other side of the spectrum from what you are creatively and competently able to do. So let's rethink why we feel like engineers aren't being respected. And I think that conversion of understanding that miscommunication of the valuation is translating over that course of time where the architects are handing it over to the engineers so that you all can do what's magnificent. So I think maybe that perspective could be adjusted, but I think it's up to you, Folashaki, about how that valuation and that translation to what you know and how it trickles up, or rather down, from what CEOs want into what you need to build. There may be some miscommunication or a mismatch of how you guys value what needs to be done. So from Chauhan Sanjeev, for people with experience in IT and not necessarily on the cloud, what will help to get an on-cloud job as they cannot go at entry level? Any thoughts or suggestions, Mike?
Okay, so Chanan and Sanjeev, for one thing, I consider entry-level jobs dead. You're going to have to go in as a senior cloud engineer capability-wise, or a cloud architect, or something good. The reason entry-level jobs are dead are as follows. It takes so much time, effort, and money to train an entry-level person. For example, let's say I hired a brand new junior person. I've got to dedicate a $150,000 a year employee 6 months full-time to teach that person how to do it. It's going to cost me $75,000 to hire somebody. And in today's world, it's sad, but especially with Gen Z, people tend to stay in jobs only a year or so. So if it takes you 6 months to train somebody and the person's out of there in 9 months to a year, you're not going to train them. So you can still get hired, but you got to be great. And I'll give you just a few examples of people whose first job was a cloud architect that had no experience. Noah Parker was a social worker. We've got Al, whose first job was a senior solution architect. We've got Wallace, whose first job was an enterprise architect in tech. We've got Delroy, whose first job was a cloud security architect. We have Vladimir, whose first job was a cloud architect. We've got Jeffrey West, whose first job was a cloud architect. We've got Ivan Tamba and Coyote over at AWS, whose first job was an architect. We have people like Jennifer, whose first job was an architect. And we had people, for example, like Jermaine, who was selling landscaping gear, whose first tech job was an enterprise architect. So I can give you examples all day. And we get people hired like this every day. Alonzo and I have our own happy dance that we do every single night when we get somebody hired, almost every night when it happens. So the key is you can get there, but you got to be great, which means you can't just be tech. You got to be everything. So here's the secret to getting that first job. If you are just a great engineer or just a great architect and that's it, you're not getting hired. That's right. I said it. If all you have are tech skills, nobody's going to hire you because you got to compete with others. So not only do you have to be just as good, but when you ask employers, they'll tell you that they will hire someone with soft skills over hard skills. That's right. You can see it in major news publications like Forbes. Soft skills in many cases matter more to employers than hard skills. So if I'm going to interview someone and I care about the following, 50% is your tech skills and 50% is, can I trust you? Are you energetic, enthusiastic, and passionate? Do you bring out the best in others? Are you willing to go above and beyond? And are you a good team player? And do you communicate well? So now you're really in a different field. So let's say Alonzo comes to me, and Alonzo is an architect with 25 years experience. Now, Alonzo is a very close friend of mine. I love him as if he's my own brother. He and I think the same. We could be twins. I'm telling you, we could just be twins.
Yes.
So, isn't it true?
Very. Yeah, it was
So,
shockingly true.
so I'm gonna now pretend Alonzo came to me and asked for a job, and he's the best 100 best technical guy in the world, but he's tired, which is not him. But let's pretend he's lazy. I don't trust him, and he's a lone wolf. So now I give Alonzo a 50% of his interview score is related to his competency, and 50% is related to all that other stuff. So I give Alonzo a 50 out of 50 because he's a rock star technically, and I give him 10% out of the 50, 10 out of 50 on everything else. Now I average a score together. He's a 60 out of 100. Next person comes in my room. They're 3/4 as good as Alonzo, tech-wise. But they're bubbly, they're likable, they're energetic, enthusiastic, and passionate. They get a 50 out of 50 on all the attributes that I love, and a 35 out of 50 on the competency. Now it's an 85 versus the 65. Why is Alonzo here? Because he's 100% competent at what he does. He's got the greatest attitude, energy, enthusiasm. I trust him. Like I said, he's like a brother to me. And is willing to go above and beyond. He's 100 out of 100. But that's really the key. When you are new, you got to be great, 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 great. And you got to be so likable that I want you on my team, even if I have to train you. And Sanjeev, I've trained people, I've hired people with no tech background. I don't care. I'll train them because it's that hard to get somebody that good that I truly want on my team. It's that rare. Good question.
That is, Shawshan. From Style Plus, I work as a network administrator / technician. I'm looking to transition to the cloud security architecture or as being a security architect. My boss is saying that in order for me to do that, I have to go from analyst to engineer to architect. Rather than just learn security architecture from the architects. What do you think?
I think you should go get a new job at a new company. So Style Plus, here's what happens sometimes. A lot of times somebody has a job. Actually, there's two situations, I'll tell you. And somebody gets called typecast. So I like movies, okay? Arnold, so let's say Sylvester Stallone is one of my favorite actors. This guy's great. He did Rocky, he did Rambo, he did The Expendables. If there's a Sylvester Stallone movie, I'm going to watch it. But when I see Sylvester Stallone, I see muscly action star. He generally speaking doesn't get involved in melodramas. He generally doesn't get involved in a bunch of romantic comedy movies because everybody sees him as an action star. So if your manager sees you as that hands-on techie, there's no way they're going to let you become an architect no matter what you do. And they're coming up with roadblocks and sticking them in your way. The second side of it is, and I worked for a company where I wanted to move into a business role. I had been a sales engineer and I wanted to move into one of these executive positions. And I told my manager, and my manager says, we don't allow engineers into these positions. And I thought, okay, it's time to get a new job. Now, Style Plus, what did I do? Well, I went home that night. I took my wife to dinner. I don't drink very often, but I had a martini with her. Actually, I watched a James Bond movie, so I had 2 vodka martinis, shaken but not stirred that night. And after those 2 martinis, because I'd seen that James Bond movie, I had an epiphany. I'm going to pretend that I know nothing about engineering. So I looked at what the executives did. I noticed they were all in good suits. I bought a bunch of good suits. I changed my clothes. I bought new shoes. My manager would say, Mike, can you build this for me? And I'd say, well, I can't, but you know what? I know this really great resource. Let me take them to lunch and ask them to do it. Style Plus, after about 6 months, nobody knew that I was even an engineer in the first place. They all saw me as an executive. But Style Plus, I did complete an MBA, and it had taken about 50 to 100 of the $100,000 of leadership courses, which I took after the MBA at that time. So I worked really hard to change my brand. But what be the easiest thing to do would be learn how to become a great architect, and you're going to need some help with it, and then get a job somewhere else. Because if your manager doesn't see you as something else, you got to go somebody else.
Yeah, I totally agree. And then, you think about, number one, your manager knows that you have aspirations. So with that aspirations, he knows that your time there is limited. So he may or may not take that very well.
No.
On top of all of that, you are branded as the administrator technician. So based on their culture, prior experiences, past, and everything else, they can't see how you would matriculate from point A to where you are to becoming a cloud architect. So they may provide some resistance to that. And usually in corporate America, when you're trying to transition internally, that department that you want to go to is going to find out what your capabilities and your review has been priorly in your new position. That may be some conversation that unfortunately you're not going to be a part of, that may affect where you go. So those are a lot of headwinds that you have to face, Style Plus, which is why Mike was saying that you're going to have to rebrand, reinvent yourself in another location, because they'll know from day one you are a cloud architect instead of climbing, or rather ice skating uphill, if you will, to trying to get them to think of you as a cloud architect when you've been in that position so long.
Exactly.
From Purnell, can you please explain what the focus of what a cloud infrastructure architect and a general cloud architect are on a given real life scenario?
Yeah, so Purnell, and I've been both. I've been every kind of architect you could think: cloud architect, enterprise architect, network architect, business architect. So let's kind of think about this. So if a big bank, let's say Bank of America, contacted me as the cloud infrastructure architect, I'm just making up Bank of America because I have experience working with them in the past, I would then say, and I wanted to be a cloud infrastructure architect, here's what I'd be looking into. I'd be looking, they'd probably have about 500 VPCs on the cloud. And the reason they would be breaking their cloud into like 500 or so VPCs is you have really poor security on the cloud compared to the data center. And what you have to do in the cloud is micro-segment your cloud to get to the same level of security that we could produce in the data center, because we lack control and we lack other things. So I might be looking at their 500 VPCs. I would be looking at their VPC peering. I would be looking at their BGP routing. I would be looking at their IP addressing plan. I would be looking at their connections to the external cloud providers and the external data providers, and I would be 100% focused on the network. So basically, I would be a network architect and only think about the network. Now you're really needing deep networking knowledge. You're getting into that CCIE realm where all you know is networking and your focus is networking and you don't care about anything else. You're not looking into their security. You're not looking into their applications. You're not looking into anything other than the network. By comparison, a generic cloud architect that would work for Bank of America would be looking at, okay, we need to be in these three clouds. Now, what is the connectivity? We need to connect these three clouds. Now, what kind of applications are going to make their financial advisors do a better job? What kind of applications are going to make their client advisors or their like financial secretaries do a better job? What are the retail trading applications that they're going to be using? What kind of black box trading systems is that organization be using? Do you know, how do we create a new video conferencing thing across the cloud? How do we get this stuff across the cloud? That's a general cloud architect, everything. And because you're basically leading 50 different careers, you can't get too deep on anything, because the second you focus too much on the network, you just lost security or you lost the application. So while that cloud infrastructure architect is going to consult to the general cloud architect about the network, for example, the cloud architect has to focus on everything. And that's why you're going to have to pick one. Now, Purnell, I'll give you some very interesting statistics. The closer you are to tech, the lower your salary is going to be. So you could be an infrastructure architect, or you can be a cloud architect that focuses on enterprise functions. One will yield you several $100,000 more than the other. The closer you are to the business and the farther away you are to the tech, the more you'll earn, the more respect you will gain from your superiors, the more the industry will respect you, the more you will appear in industry publications, news publications, and be speaking at conferences. But here's the thing. You have to do what's going to make you happy. I love the network. I do. And I have fun with the infrastructure. And I have fun with the coordination and management. But in either case, it's all about what you like. That's a great question.
Okay. Can you please? Okay. Yeah, we already went through that. Are there any other questions? Okay. Should architects fully understand and be able to explain infrastructure as a service, platform as a service, software as a service?
Okay, so these are made up marketing terms.
Yeah.
If
I
I
usually
walked into
agree.
any CEO and said, I got your IaaS for you, he'd kick me out of the room and I'd be fired. If I discussed PaaS, I'd still be kicked out of the room and SAS. Now, here you do need to understand is how are you going to help make that customer better? And it's not with jargon, because if you use any jargon with your customers, again, they kick you out of the room and your replacement thanks you for the new job. But you need to understand how it's working. For example, if you just do a lift and shift where you take all the applications and virtual machines exactly the way they are and move them to the cloud, you're using the cloud as a data center. By the way, this will give you the best performance, the most control, and it will cause you not to be locked into the vendor. So you should know why and when a lift and shift is appropriate. Platform as a service, we think about, for example, just upload your code and it's going to work. Now, if the business itself, hi Cindy, my little cat came to visit me. Now, if the business itself has an application which runs very sporadically, it might be easier to just upload their code and go. Now, if the business is going to run their code constantly and they're going to go serverless, it's going to run the cost so much higher than if they used infrastructure as a service. So the key is having the judgment to know which to use, not what these things are. Should I move it over as is? Should we refactor this applications? Or when is it good to use something? You know, a small business like mine, I love using Zoom. I think Zoom's the coolest thing ever. I run it. It's a software as a service application. I don't really have to manage the servers that it runs on. But if I'm running a critical business and I need better conferencing, I might not run a software as a service application. Not because Zoom isn't awesome, but maybe I want something that's going to work independent of the actual internet. And again, the software as a service platform, unless I can insource that into my building, might not be the right thing. So it's all dependent upon the business needs. What you really need to be in plain, Purnell, is why you would choose each one. Which one is best for the business under which circumstances, not how to be explained these things. These are silly concepts that are in certifications. Knowing what to choose, when to choose, and how to choose makes sense. Knowing what happens when you choose SaaS or something that's pre-made, what limitations does it give the business? They've got less customization.
Yeah.
For example, how does that affect the business? What happens if it traps the business into a new workflow, which makes the employees do things differently than they did before? What are the implications of that on the business? See, this is not engineering. This is not what learning how to configure what's in front of you. This has nothing to do with, and learning what to configure what's in front of you will not convince you how to do things that are away. What does that thing in Japan have to do with that thing in Brazil? The thing that Leo does in Brazil for my team, does that affect Tyrone in Cape Town? Or does it affect Eddie in Bamenda, Cameroon? Or does it affect Chris, who's right now in, I think, Key West, with the chickens, running across the street? I mean, if that's where he's at. So, we miss Chris terribly because he's gone, but, he'll be back soon. But, those are the kind of things that you need to be thinking about, not anything that's just part of a certification. That has nothing to do with any of our jobs at all.
And also breaking it down, like we always say, it's kind of funny because we had a funny thing about acronyms today. We need to explain in terms that CEOs understand. They're there to make money. Like we always emphasize, they don't care about the tech. Engineers are passionate about it. Security architects are passionate about their facet of the overall architecture, networking, and so forth. However, at the end of the day, a CEO could care less about it. No. Am I going to keep my stakeholders happy with this implementation? How much is this going to cost? Am I going to be able to justify through the perspectives you provide? Is this going to be a good return on investment? How long, when, and where? So these are the things that an architect needs to communicate to them, as opposed to this feature is fast by such and such percentage, and it will be able to do this at such and such milliseconds. Doesn't answer his question. So Purnell, to that point, I added that in because it's just important that you understand and able to translate IASS, PASS, and SASS in a way that business leaders can understand, so that they can understand that valuation and how it's going to translate into money for their businesses, for bonuses for you as a cloud architect, and for the overall organization.
Exactly. And while we're here, just a little more to the point. While you're not going to be getting into this stuff, you better believe if you're a cloud architect, your customer is going to be asking you, hey, Mike, this chat GPT thing, can we reduce our staff in the marketing department? Can we reduce our engineering staff? How can we use this chat GPT thing to get closer to our customers? How can we use this chat GPT thing to improve their performance? Mike, while we're at it, what other AI technologies can we use? Hey, Mike, I heard John Chambers has this new networking service as a thing that he's doing. How is that going to interact? See, basically what you need to be able to do is at Purnell is you need to be able to watch CNBC News in the morning. You need to be able to understand all the business things that are going on and start thinking, okay, this was in the Wall Street Journal or CNBC or the Financial Times. How can I address this problem with which technology? And that's why this is not a hands-on code and configure role, because you need to take a step back. How does this impact this? Chris is away this week, which means Elonzo and I, which are two creatives, I promise you, are going to forget to do stuff. And Chris knows that because Chris is an architect in and of himself. And Chris is busy texting me and Elonzo. We love him for this. Hey, Mike, don't forget, you got a class to teach. Hey, Elonzo, be there a little early for Mike. And so there's the key. So that's really the key. It's the ripple effect of things down the system. Good question, though.
From Miguel. Hi, team. What should an enterprise architect focus on?
So, Miguel, excellent question. So when we talked about the cloud architect, and we talked about business acumen and leadership skills and executive presence and sales skills and emotional intelligence, and the ability of how one part of the system affects another part of the system. I described the cloud architect, but the reality was I was also describing the enterprise architect. And years ago, these roles were very separate, but since everything's on the cloud now, they're very similar. The cloud architect role is about 70% 70% business and 20 to 30% tech. And the enterprise architect role is 80+% business. So the enterprise architect role is not only going to be thinking about all the systems we're housed on the clouds, public clouds and private clouds, which is everything. They're also going to be thinking about new technology. Of course, so will the cloud architect, those IoT devices that we can integrate to maybe get sensors. So the cloud architect is a level up. Now, Miguel, the reality is while I've gotten lots of people enterprise architect jobs and lots of cloud architect jobs, generally speaking, the cloud architect I can get someone as their first job. The AWS Solution Architect job, that's nothing to get somebody as their first job. The enterprise architect job, generally, they want to know you've got a couple of years architect experience. Maybe you've been a solution architect for a few years or a cloud architect. And typically, you're dealing with an MBA. For an enterprise architect, not always, but typically it's really that kind of thing. Enterprise architects are typically a director or VP level position. But having said that, Jermaine was my student. Last job selling landscaping gear. Just got hired as an enterprise architect as his first tech job. Wallace Agano was my student. You guys saw him here on this channel. He did a 2-hour show with you guys. First job, he was at JP Morgan Chase as an enterprise architect as well. So kind of keep that in the back of your mind. You can do it, but more business. And the reality is when you got to become a cloud architect with these kind of business skills, you're earning the same as an enterprise architect. And these aren't just roles that are small. These roles can be $500,000 plus roles.
Yeah.
And you guys see me sharing statistics and sharing screenshots from salary.com and Glassdoor all the time.
From Shiraz, you keep saying cloud architects don't touch the tech, but if you don't touch the tech, how will an architect understand the tech to better sell and implement a solution?
Well, first, we don't implement anything. We cloud architects design it, present it, and sell it. And once we're done selling it, if it's a big customer, there'll be a service delivery executive appointed, which will be a director level person, who will then find the cloud engineers that work for the organization that go implement it. And there'll also be a project manager at the same time. So somebody else does this, an entire different team. And Shiraz, when you're done this, guess what? Once it's built, they don't maintain it anymore either. Now they turn it over to a maintenance team, which are called sysops people.
Mm-hmm.
And when it breaks, guess what, Shiraz? The sysops people don't touch it either. They use a tech support team, which is another team. Now, here's the thing. If you'd like to tell me, I'm all ears, and I've been an architect for 25 years. If you want to tell me how setting up a virtual machine in New Jersey and installing Linux on a web server will teach you how that's going to affect the employees 2 continents away, tell me. I'm all ears. If you can tell me how learning how to configure a router is going to teach you how it's going to affect the voice systems, which it will in Dubai, and the video systems in London, more power to you. But I know lots of engineers with 20 years experience that have no concept of how any of this stuff ties together in pieces and parts, because you can't. So you can learn all these configuration skills if you want, but when you're done, you're going to need training to learn how to design them, because it won't teach you anything related to design. But I will tell you this, Shiraz. The average cloud architect earns $800 a day, which is about $16,000 a month. And a good one earns $1,500 to $2,000 a day with years of experience. So if it takes you 6 months of learning how to configure things, which is somebody else's job, the sad reality is you lost $96,000 of earnings. So I'm not telling you can't configure the cloud. I'm just telling you that if you do, you're still going to need just as much training, because it's not going to teach you anything about business process re-engineering. It won't help you understand anything. And sadly, I've had to retrain people, thousands of people that have spent their life trying to learn via hands-on, that unfortunately just don't know how to design.
From Donald, I am in industrial engineering. I want the SAP Solutions Architect Professional and AWS Professional Certification. What can I do to get me there in terms of projects and the path to follow?
Okay, Donald, I have to ask you a serious question. What do you want to do?
Yeah.
Because basically what you asked me, I want to put it into more simple terms. You asked me, which airplane should I get on? And the reason I say this is a cloud architect and a cloud engineer are very different. A DevOps engineer is different than a cloud engineer too. A network engineer is also different than a cloud engineer. An offensive security engineer has a different set of skills than a defensive security engineer. So if you want to tell us exactly what your goals are, we would love to tell you how to get there. But without knowing your goals, you just mentioned certification, and certification really, it's just the name of a service and how to configure that. And it's not going to prepare you really for any job. So I need to know the job you want so I can tell you how to get there. And Almighty, who just said that that's all we do. In the chat box, he's working as a solution architect, as a senior solution architect. And I know thousands of architects, and I've been one for a quarter of a century. We don't touch the tech.
Yeah. How does an architect compare to a role as a program manager? What I can share is that architects, we design, present, and sell. The program manager manages how that implementation goes from that point across to completion. So again, I can see how you can understand how architect may be involved with the overall implementation of it, but that is their portion of it. Again, we focus on, we interview the client. We talk about, we ask questions. I mean, it's borderline a pleasant interrogation, if you will, because we're asking questions about the questions that they answered to create more questions, because the more questions we ask, the more we can understand their business, what their goals are, how we're able to solve their problems, and in a lot of cases, come up with a lot of questions to have them think about, how is this going to affect you if we go down this path over a 3-5 year scenario? What industries are going to be affected? What if this happens in a change? What if this happens in a pandemic? What if this happens in a bear or a bull economy? How is this going to affect you? And these are the questions that help us to streamline and create more potential and more potent solutions and options for them to look at. Now that they've selected this particular architecture, we hand it off to the people to build it. The time that it takes and that scope needed to bring that from concept to completion, that's where the program manager gets involved.
Exactly.
For Mike, in comparing security, general, and other types of cloud specialties, can you rate from low to high the salaries, customer facing time, etc.? We don't know what that etc. is, so could you please clarify which job did you enjoy the most?
So I've done it all. So Mike, I started out as a technical architect. Because the technical architect is very close to the technology and they're close to an engineer, that salary was the lowest I've ever earned in my entire life. Then I will tell you, I took more of the enterprise architect view for most. I was a network architect next. And I'm going to tell you, networking people are paid well. The reason they're paid well is I can find you 100,000 networking people, but I can tell you that if I can find you 200 in the entire world that are capable, they're all earning a lot of money. And nobody cares about your experience. I was a principal network architect within 2 years of the time I started networking. Now, I lived, ate, and breathed networking. I also read 1,000 pages a day, every day for the first year of my career. But that's just me. And I was able to do that when I was young. I couldn't do that now. So I will tell you that I actually did earn well then in networking. I did. And networking, if you find somebody really good like Mark, and you put him in the right spot, Mark, who's also on this call, they can do very well in networking. Now, I will then tell you that I worked as an enterprise architect, and that's going to pay you much more. And the reason, you can be at a company and earn $300,000-$400,000 a year as an enterprise architect is because you're a business executive. You can even earn more than that if you're a good enterprise architect, because you're now focused mostly on the business. So the closer you get to the boss, the more you get paid. Mm-hmm. So if you're a technical architect, you're going to have an engineering manager, most likely, and they're going to have a senior manager, and they're going to have a director, and then they're going to have a VP, and then they're going to have an SVP, and then they're going to have an EVP, and then you're going to get to the CTO, and then the COO, and then the CEO. Whereas if you're a really good enterprise architect, you may already be a VP, and you may be reporting to an SVP, or you may be a director or a senior director reporting to a VP or an SVP. So when you're in those enterprise architect roles, you're already higher in the food chain or org chart, whatever you want to call it, and you're there. Now, I also worked as a business architect, Mike, and that's a management and strategy consultant. I did very well there too. So if you're going to be on the cloud, the only specialties that I would actually recommend right now, I do like the cloud infrastructure piece because very few people understand it. And in economics, we have the supply and demand curve, where the greater the supply, the lower the cost, the lower the supply. And since everybody knows how to code in there, coding is a very low value skill, right? Where things like this are a higher value skill. So I like the networking piece. I also like security, by the way. Now, generally speaking, security can also offer some good opportunities, but to really earn as a security architect, you're going to have really, really, really good business acumen skills, and you're going to have to find yourself at an elite security provider like a Palo Alto Networks or Cisco system, potentially a Fortinet. Now, I truly believe there are going to be AI architects that are working on the cloud in the future. I'll consider that a subset of the cloud. And these architects, again, aren't going to be people that touch the tech. They're going to be people that work as part of the cloud team that help the businesses figure out how to leverage AI. Again, that's going to be somebody that's really going to, I think, going to be earning a lot in the future, because these are people that are going to help businesses figure out how to be more efficient. And I think they're going to do really well. Personally, I like the enterprise architect or the business architect best. I love getting respected. I'd much rather have a steak and a Morton's than I would actually be like an engineer who's stuck in the data center at 2 o'clock in the morning. I don't want to ever go back to that. Mm-mm. Yeah. I like having conversations with the CEO. As an enterprise architect, I'm going to go be playing golf with my customers, and I think that's much more fun. I'm going to be drinking good scotch with my customers, and and I'm not joking, Mike. I had to learn scotch selection and wine selection in my architecture career, as well as which fork and knife to use under the right circumstances. Because while we don't code, we're at that country club level for every day of our life, and we have to be really good on those things. I haven't hired a fashion consultant to teach me how to dress for the job because I didn't know. So, there's that. But Mike, I'd say by far my favorite was the enterprise architect role.
Yeah, it's a great ride. It's phenomenal, and I think that underscores the closer you are to the money, the closer they understand your capabilities. The further away you are to the from the money, because that requires interpersonal conversation, relationships, team building, understanding the nuance in the culture, be it the one that you work with compared to the one that your client is. And that's something that you can't binary and hello world and pseudo yum. You can't do any of those things. But the further along you get away from that, the more automated things can be, and that comes within the umbrella of ChatGPT, a lot of the automation. So when we think about person versus automation, ChatGPT, understandably, you're going to have a little bit on the reins with that, but ChatGPT doesn't take sick time, vacation time. It doesn't show up late. It doesn't do any of these things, which lends to the fact you versus automation. And that's less money for you because an automation, more importantly, doesn't take a paycheck.
Nope.
So think about why the architect is so important, why we learn what we do, the different layers of what we need to learn, and how it's applicable to not only both the business side and the tech side.
Exactly.
From Carlos, why do I see job descriptions? We know where you're going for architects requiring hands-on experience.
So Carlos, this is a really great question. I've yet to see an actual job description for an architect that ever made sense.
Yeah.
So I'll also tell you this, Carlos. I've never had more than 10% of anything that's in a job description, and I've never not gotten hired for a company that I wanted to or interviewed for. So the key is you're going to have to not go through HR, don't apply and go through a recruiter. Here's what happens with most job descriptions. And I'm guilty of it myself. Elonzo's a manager. He's guilty of it. Chris is guilty of it. We all do it. Here's what we do. When we have to write a job description, somebody like me would have no time. I get thousands of messages a day. You think I have time to write a job description? I don't. So I go to Indeed, or I go to ZipRecruiter, or I go to Dice. Next thing I do is I type the word architect. And I give it a glance. I'm like, wow, this is really comprehensive. Oh, wait, it doesn't include anything I want. I add the 5 things that I want, and then I save it. And then I pop it in. And then the next person does the same thing. And by the time you're done, you're getting this cut and paste job description. Now, Carlos, I've literally spoken to VPs of HR and gone over the job descriptions with them, and they said, that's not what our peoples do. I've literally spoken to the hiring manager saying, because I knew this wasn't related to the job description, I say, is this what you want your person to do? And they say, no. I'm like, why isn't it a job description? Cut and paste job description. I've literally seen, job descriptions that were silly. Carlos, it got so bad that CIO Magazine actually started asking CIOs, the people that basically are our boss, what do you want in a cloud architect? And they said things like lead the cultural change for cloud adoption, coordinate a cloud adoption team, develop the cloud broker team. Tyrone, can you pop that link from that CIO Magazine article into the chat box? But here's the thing. Everybody wants experience. And why do I want experience? Because I know when you take a certification, you're not going to know anything other than the name of a service and how to configure that. Now, Carlos, I also know that if you just took an AWS certification, they're going to say serverless, serverless, serverless. And I know that serverless may be the worst thing or the best thing. I also know if you took an AWS certification, they're going to tell you, oh, for high availability, use CloudFront. But if you look at Amazon, they don't just use CloudFront. They use CloudFront, Fastly, and Akamai because a single CloudFront is a single point of failure. I also know that if you take a cloud certification like an AWS one, they're going to tell you about DynamoDB, Amazon Aurora, Elastic Compute Cloud. And Carlos, I also know that with 98% of customers, you can't use those things because 98% of customers use more than one cloud, and these cloud proprietary things prevent multi-cloud from working. So what I'm looking for is knowing that you're not just a certified person, you actually know something. And I'm hoping, which never works out, that if you've got years of experience, you're going to know how to put the pieces and parts together. But what ultimately finds out is we find out we have none. And that's why I've given you examples of 10 or 20 people that we've gotten hired with zero experience. And nobody really cares. They care is, can you actually do the job?
Right.
You can look at a whole lot of videos on my YouTube channel of people that have gotten hired with no experience. We got one person here. His name is Al. He's a senior solution architect. His first tech job. He's in the chat box. So got lots of students of mine that have graduated in the chat box that have gotten their first architect job too. But this one's a senior solution architect, and he's not working at some joke company. He's working at one of the most sophisticated technology and management consulting companies in the entire world. Now, he's awesome. If I had a bigger budget, I'd hire him as part of my team. Great guy, but kind of keep that in the back of your mind.
From Jack, I keep getting a 570 score. I went through all your videos, and okay, I'm assuming I've been following you a little bit, Jack. I believe that's a 570 score on the solution architect, and I believe you need a minimum of 680 or 720. I can't remember. I went through all your videos and other similar videos. What else should I read or watch? And based on his conversation, I think his focus is on passing the examination. But we have more expansive response to that. Mike?
Yeah, if your goal is to pass an exam, you either don't know the material or you don't know how to take the exam. Now, most people don't know how to take the exam because you can take somebody that's or Jack, the possibility is also you've got a lot of experience and knowledge, because if you have a lot of knowledge, you're going to have a hard time with the exam because the exam's assuming the only thing you know is what's in that little bit of materials they give you. And if you know anything above that, you're going to have a hard time because the way Cisco would do it will be the wrong way, for example. The way Google would do it will also be a wrong way because it's an AWS exam. Generally speaking, I recommend getting a practice test. Review and Prep has some excellent practice tests. Andrew Brown also has some good practice tests. If you're failing an exam and you know the material, it's your exam taking skills. So learn how to take the exam better, get a practice exam. Not one of those exams which is out there, which is the copy of the exam. And that's how most people pass these things. They just buy an exam and they bought the exam, the exact exam, and they take it. But what I'm more concerned about is that, if you learn the material, but even still, Jack, realize that the certification itself isn't really the actual job skills.
No.
So keep that in the back of your mind. Make sure you get the career skills for whatever it is. Because, Jack, I've got people like Delroy Bat that got hired with zero certifications. It's not about your certifications. It's about how great you are and all those other attributes we talked about.
Yeah. From Clarence, is the AWS Cloud Practitioner certification a scam and not worth it? I'll tell you from personal experience on my cloud journey years ago, the cloud practitioner honestly is not valuable at all. The only way that it could possibly be valuable if you're a pre-existing AWS salesperson that is not even a cloud architect, and you're focusing on getting more understanding of getting a glimpse of what a trusted advisor does and how you can sell that. And that's as far as it gets. It's very easy to take. It's very easy to pass. And the reason why is because there's no valuation to it, let alone it helping you to become a competent cloud architect. So I highly say this with personal experience and objectivity. Do not take that exam because it is a waste of time and resources. And when you couple that with how much a cloud architect makes, currently, I'm always checking this like I check all the business happenings. The current salary for a cloud architect is $200,764. And if you spend 2-3 months studying for this exam, for this certification, you think about a breakdown of $16,000 per month of what a cloud architect makes. That means that you're spending a minimum of $32,000, $33,000, $34,000 in lost revenue to study for a practitioner exam that is not going to yield you a fraction of that. So think about what we call the opportunity cost of what you're going to spend and the time and resources that you're going to use to get a certification that is not going to be helpful for you at all.
Yeah, well said, Elonzo. And we also made a video about why we don't recommend taking that. Now, there is one exception. We do work with some groups in Africa And in Africa, often AWS gives a free voucher. Again, we would tell our students in Africa not to do this test, except for this one good thing that it gives them. We have a lot of students that earn very little money. And to come up with $150 for the AWS Certified Solution Architect Associate is a very challenging thing to do. For them to get the free Cloud Practitioner exam and pass that exam, and then skip the AWS Solution Architect Associate and go straight to the Certified Solution Architect Professional, to get that exam for $150, because AWS gives you a 50% discount. Now, for those of us in the US or the UK, you know, $150 or $200 is not worth 2 months of our time. But there are people in certain villages and throughout the world, whether it be Africa, parts of the Middle East, parts of Asia, where that $150 is so significant that it makes sense for them to study for the Certified Solution Architect Associate and then take the Cloud Practitioner exam. Don't study for that exam. Study for the Solution Architect Associate and get that 50% discount off of the Certified Solution Architect Professional. And that way, the entire certification experience to get to the AWS Certified Solution Architect Professional is only $150. And there's about 50 people from our organization which volunteer with another organization in Africa. It's a wonderful organization. And we're teaching the Solution Architect Associate so they can pass the Cloud Practitioner exam and then go take the Certified Solution Architect Professional. But otherwise, don't take the exam.
Style Plus, do you teach system design?
Yes, we spend several hundred hours teaching system design because that's what architects do. Without learning system design, you're an engineer, not an architect.
Yeah. From Vernon, what types of certification are acceptable for cloud architects for networking other than the one you mentioned earlier?
The Cisco Certified Network Professional is a very good one. Juniper Networks has an equivalent one, but you know, it's too small. So I would do the Cisco Certified Network Professional. What I would not do is the AWS Advanced Networking, because that's not even an intro to junior level networking, and it doesn't include any of the real networking that you need to know. So I would do the CCIE or the CCNP. And the reality is, Vernon, it's not about certifications, it's about the knowledge. See, the CCNP, which is the one I'll tell you to do, does not have enough BGP on it. So you really need CCIE level BGP. And at the same time, you don't need half of the things that are on the CCNP. But if I was going to sing a networking certification, I would say the CCNP or the CCIE, but do not do a cloud networking certification. Don't waste your time on a Microsoft networking certification, a Google networking certification, or an AWS networking certification. There's just no substance there.
From Silent Poet, how hard is the move from security engineer to security architect?
For our students, it's nothing because we train them to be architects. But if you've been working as an engineer, and Silent Poet, we've got lots of people that have been engineers, including security engineers that want to become cloud security architects. It takes 6 to 8 months of our training, which is about 300 to 500 hours in that time that they're there. Because you have to remember, as a security engineer, you might configure the firewall, the IDS IPS system, or something like that. As a cloud security architect, now you're consulting. Now you're meeting with clients throughout the world. You're asking about their business assets that they're trying to protect. You're determining their intellectual property. You're determining their attack vectors. You're determining what their competitors might try to do to them. You're now determining what new offerings they have. You're now determining the training gaps that the employees have. You're now dealing with ISO certifications or PCI DSS certifications or regulatory certifications. You're now dealing with regulatory auditing, and you're going from the tech to a position that designs the tech. So how hard is it? I think it's easy, but I get people hired as architects every single day, but I do it with training. It would be very challenging to do on your own without getting business training and presentation training and sales training and executive presence training. And Silas Poen, I did go from engineer to architect. And the reason I created the Cloud Architect Career Development Program is it cost me a lot of money and a lot of time. First, I took approximately $100,000 worth of leadership courses on CXO relevancy, courses on sales, courses on management of people, courses on difficult conversations, courses on executive presence. I mean, you name it. And then I also did an MBA. So the MBA gave me the business acumen, and then an additional $100,000 of skills, which companies paid for, thankfully for me, gave me all that executiveness. And I still have an executive coach, Silent Poet, which I started 20 years ago when I first became an architect. And she's still with me, the same executive coach. And she's amazing and she makes me better. And I'm thrilled and grateful for her. But that's what it took for me to be able to train all these architects. Not only 25 years of architecture experience, but a multi-$100,000 education. So if you get architecture training, it'll be simple for you. But if you do it on your own, there are going to be the modules and pieces that I did to make the transition. It's a lot. It's not just a little, but you can easily do it. And we've got lots of experience doing it every day.
Well, what are your thoughts on companies who equate solutions architects and senior software engineers as being the same role?
There aren't companies that do that. Now, the solution architect role can be anything, but there aren't. Speak to the manager themselves, they don't want that. In fact, here's the thing. The only architects that even have a software background for the most part are solution architects that work for software companies. So for example, if you worked at a software company as a solution architect, they'd want you to have a software background. But we're dealing with cloud companies, which is networking and data center services, which is a totally different thing. And if somebody actually did, I would run because it's not an architect job.
Yeah. You think about those two, they want to mesh. And that's a good segue in, Mike, is that there are a lot of companies, if they want some sort of super engineer, architect, ninja who can do all this stuff, run, because they're going to use you up. And those are two separate, if they're not willing to somehow pay you $500,000 to start to be able to do this, which no one would do anyway, they just want to use you up and they're going to take advantage of you. So please, if they want something like that, that is not the job for you or for anyone else.
Angela always is incredible.
Angelo, yes.
Angelo, so good to see you.
Yeah. What advice would you give someone who wants to be an architect only for the money? What should an architect's motivation be? People, technology, business, or other? Good question.
Now, Angelo, this is a real tough one. We all have some motivation to be paid well. I love that. But I don't think you can do any job for the money. Because here's what happens. You take a job, you earn a couple $100,000 more than you did before. Now, your spouse decides that their shoes go from $100 to $1,000. Your toys go from $1,000 to $5,000. Your car goes from a $30,000 car to an $80,000 car. And your house goes from a $500,000 house to $1 million house. And guess what? You're now equally poor as you were before. And you're miserable in your new job. So you can't do a job that you dislike. My advice is find your passion. Because you can make money at anything if you're great at it. I mean, there's network engineers that are BGP that are so good that are earning $500,000 a year. Now, do they know anything other than BGP? No. Have they read 300,000 pages of BGP things throughout their life? Yeah, they have. But they're really that good. But the point is always do what you're passionate about. See, Angela, I got a secret. I used to practice internal medicine. I've watched thousands of people die. It was truly traumatic. And I've spoken to them when they were dying. And I've said, what would you do differently? I had many people that said, nobody knew what a nurse practitioner was 20 some years ago. So they'd say, I wish I was a doctor like you. I wish I spent more time with my daughter. I wish I didn't cheat on my wife. I still would have had her. I wish I spent more time with my kids. I wish I had a job that I loved my whole life, but nobody ever said, I wish I had more money. So I think you have to want to do the job and you have to want it and you have to do it really, really great. I mean, I do what I love. Elonzo's here because he does what he loves. Any of us on our team could earn more by going out there in the industry. But at the end of the day, if you love what you do, you're not working. Mark Twain said, if you make your vacation your vocation, you'll never work a day in your life. He's right. I worked as a network engineer for 6 months. That was work. And then I became an architect, and I've never worked since. I've never had a day of work since then. Now, I put in some 12-hour days, 16-hour days. Alonzo can tell you, he can find me, sending text messages. It's Sunday at 2:00 in the morning, but I've never worked. Everything I do is fun. With every new hire, I have a party. With every time I'm here having a conversation, answering questions, I love it. So I've never worked. And that's the key. I think you got to do what you love, Angela.
Great question, man. Mr. Freeman, I think I may know who this is. Is there a defined path to becoming an enterprise architect with a project example?
Well, Mr. Freeman, it's like becoming an architect. It's about building a brand that shows you as a thought leader. It's about understanding how to talk to the right people. It's about having people know your name as an enterprise architect. It's about being able to do business processing re-engineering and marrying people, processes, and technology to improve a business's performance. It's about being able to connect with others. It's about being able to know how to entertain clients. And it's about really getting the knowledge of what are all these systems that are actually out there. So is there a predefined path? Not really. I know enterprise architects that were an engineer when they were 20 years old, that are now 60 years old, that haven't looked at the technology forever. I know other people in CTO roles, believe it or not, that have never worked in technology in their entire life, or CIO roles that have never worked in tech in their entire life. The real key is can you communicate that you understand how the technology improves the business? Do you have the business acumen to do it? Now, if you've been writing Terraform scripts, that's going to show that you do not know. But maybe you worked in management consulting. Lots of those people could become architects. Maybe you worked in sales for a little while. That's a big piece of this job. Maybe you worked in some other industry. So project example, no. These would be the same kind of projects that I talked about for the cloud architect. Giving presentations at industry conferences. Creating thought leadership that shows how a certain technology, for example, my student that very recently wrote about how the partnership with Microsoft, ChatGPT, and Epic can change healthcare. Or somebody else that could build a business case on why a multi-cloud architecture is actually cheaper. Or somebody else that would build a document that talks about why you would want to use multi-clouds, not just from an availability perspective, which everybody needs, but from an agility perspective, a best-of-breed architecture perspective, why a best-of-breed architecture across clouds might be better than a single cloud provider with, say, just Azure. And, those are the kind of things that really show you as a leader. But no, it's not. Look, none of these architect roles are predefined. We go from the extreme of Daniel Bosu, who we trained, who is amazing. And any company would be lucky to hire him. But the point is, his last job was selling shoes at Nordstrom. He's 21 years old and didn't graduate high school, and he's working at JP Morgan Chase, the world's largest bank. To someone like a Pritipal Sejan, who we trained, who had 20 plus years experience in all kinds of technology domains, that 6 months after our training is now an enterprise architect. But they come from all those domains, and there's no background, but it does require training.
From Gerald, I have a DevOps engineer background. What advice will you give me transitioning into a cloud architect role?
Okay, two things. One is you're going to have to convince people you're not a DevOps engineer anymore.
Yeah.
And because nobody wants a DevOps engineer as an architect. Now, here's the good news. You also do know valuable things about CI/CD pipeline and automation that the rest of us wouldn't know without that DevOps. So you got something working for you, which is really great, and something working against you, which is also really bad. So what you need to do is translate the value of what you've done into architect-related terms. If you were able to increase application deployment velocity with DevOps by 11%, what was the impact of that on revenue? Did they have a better website? Did it drive more sales? If you were able to automate a cloud deployment and they got rid of 3 cloud admins in the process, You improved employee productivity by a specific percentage that shows the architect, woohoo, that shows the architect and you, look how I improved the business. The other thing, Gerald, is as a DevOps engineer, you're thinking about building. How do we build this and automate this? What you're not thinking about is the entire ecosystem of things that are there. The networking, the security. How does this one thing change everything? I've got an employee right now, Tyrone is sitting over there in Cape Town, South Africa. He's VPN'd into my network, which means he's behind my firewall. If he gets a worm on his system, how does that affect Eddie and Ansem? Eddie's in Bamenda, Cameroon, for example. How does that affect Leo, who's in Sao Paulo, Brazil? And how does that affect my IP voice systems, which is sitting in my house in Port St. Lucie, Florida, for my ability to place a phone call to Elonzo to say, hey, dude, you feel like going out for a beer and a steak after work? So all these things are there. So you're going to, my advice would be to get training. You could, with your background, you could probably try and do it on your own. But if you did, you're going to have to spend a lot of money on business training and presentation training and sales training and executive presence training. And you're going to end up doing what I did, which is basically get an MBA and take a lot of business things. Now, we've got a course that would easily get you hired for basically 3 days pay for our average graduate. But make sure, whether you're with us or without us, that you get that business training. Everything from how to read a financial statement, everything to how to lead a team, everything to how to sell to executives, everything to how to present to a CEO, CFO, CTO, CIO, and you got to learn how to present differently to them versus a manager, versus a VP, versus an engineer. So they're all different, and you got to be able to communicate to each one of them. You also, Gerald, will need to convince a customer, say Elonzo is the CEO. If I've got $1 billion architecture, and I believe me, I've worked on lots of $1 billion architectures, Elonzo is not going to spend $1 billion because he thinks it's fun. I'm going to have to show Elonzo that if you invest your $1 billion here, maybe it generates $3 billion a resume, or it reduces your staffing by this. For example, Gerald, Microsoft laid off 10,000 engineers in a single day and spent $10 billion on ChatGPT. I promise you, there was an internal business case that Microsoft had said, with ChatGPT, we can get rid of 50,000 engineers, but we're going to start at 10. It's going to pay, and look at all these other things that we can do. And Microsoft thought about it, and they thought about how these things. So make sure you get that. You probably have good application knowledge, and you probably have good automation knowledge, but you're going to need a lot more networking knowledge, a lot more security knowledge. And you're also going to need how the pieces and parts tie together. That systems integration, that's your architecture piece. Wow. How does this affect this? This new system that you pop up here, how does that affect the way the sales web works? How does that affect the accounting department? Those are the things that architects consider. So kind of keep that in the back of your mind. Please join us on Thursday in the How to Get Your First Cloud Architect Job. And please download the free guide that's in the description of this video. Not only will that tell you how to get hired, but if you join us on Thursday, we can actually literally have a face-to-face conversation if you want. You can ask me questions live, and I can ask you deep conversations. And I can even interview you if you want, a mini interview, and we can figure out what we need to get you hired as a cloud architect. And it's the best career, Gerald, you'll ever imagine. I love it.
You'll love it. From Alexi, for engineers, how much BGP do we need to learn? And what indicates that we know enough BGP, or if we do not?
Well, I don't know what kind of engineer you want to be. If you want to be a network engineer, you need to know a ton of BGP. If you want to be a cloud engineer, it depends what kind. If you're going to be a cloud security engineer, you're not going to be working with a lot of BGP. You want to be a cloud network engineer, you're going to need to know a lot of BGP. So I don't know your career. You're going to have to give me a little more information. But here's how easy it is. So, see, people have it in their mind that they're going to go on an interview and somebody's going to look at the resume and think they know something. They're not. They're not. You're going to have to prove it with the way you answer a question. So Elonzo, ask me how I would load share across 2 equal cost direct connections to AWS without getting out of order packets. And I'll show you how you show it.
Okay. How would you load share without getting out of order packets, Mike?
Okay, Alonzo, I'm assuming we basically have two direct connections across different internet service providers with different latencies. Is that correct?
Correct.
Okay, so we have a couple options. Alonzo, the simplest option is doing it without even thinking about BGP, and it's using the specificity of a route. For example, I can leak one subnet on one link, leak another subnet on another link, and have an aggregate route on both links. And what'll happen is we'll load share on the basis of the subnet, because routers prefer the most specific subnet. So the traffic will go in and out because we're going to advertise those routes on both sides. The next way we could do it is if we wanted to influence outbound traffic without getting out of order packets, is we could take the preferred subnet on this link and increase the weight. We could take the other preferred subnet on this link and increase the weight. And we could take the backup subnet on each link and decrease the weight, and they'll be therefore prioritized. Now, Alonzo, if we didn't want to use the weight, we could also modify the local preference. What we could do is we could change the local preference of the preferred subnet on this link by raising it, raise the local preference on this link of the preferred subnet, and use a reduced local preference on the backup links. But if we didn't want to use local preference, we could play with the multi-exit discriminator, or the MED, for example. And with the MED, we could reduce the MED of the preferred route on this link and reduce the MED of the preferred route on this link and raise the MED of the multi-exit discriminator on these links. But you know what, Alonzo? We could also change the origin code. Let's say, for example, the routes are coming in as incomplete because they were redistributed from an interior gateway protocol such as OSPF. What we could do is we could match those and take the preferred route and change the origin code to IGP for the route that we want, and change the origin code on the other link for the preferred route to the IGP. And we could mark those depreferred routes as incomplete. I could give you some few other ways to do it, but that's exactly how we would do it.
Yeah, you can make that route less ugly and the other one more preferred so that it goes through as well. There's so many. I'm still a novice at BGP. I'm not like Mike or Mark, but definitely BGP is a wonderful, it's kind of like that wild animal that you want to tame. And it just takes a lot of interaction to understand that animal. But to your point, yeah, Mike, you knocked it out of the park again.
Yeah, here's the key. Would you have any question about my competency?
Not at all.
Yeah,
not at all.
And that's how you prove it. Oh, by the way, there may be a link to a BGP document that Alonzo and I wrote together in the description below.
So from Style Plus, if my focus is blue team, do you think the BTL one before the CISSP is ideal to get, since you need 5 years of required experience?
Well, first, I wouldn't talk about blue team or red team. You're going to throw everybody off. But if I wanted to work in defensive security, the first thing that I would do is the CISSP. I would not waste my time on any of these generic low-value certifications that employers don't care about. I would do the CISSP. And if I didn't have 5 years experience, I would still take the CISSP. And what'll show up on your resume is CISSP associate. And the hiring manager will know that you passed the CISSP exam and you just don't have 5 years experience. And that's what'll show up on your resume.
From a lifestyle and salary perspective, would you say being an architect is just as good as being a stock trader, horse trader? What kind of trader? We always want specifics here in this question, but we're going to assume it's a stock trader.
I would think the lifestyle is better than the average trader that I know. Yeah. And I've worked on Wall Street. And I would tell you in many cases that an elite architect earns more than many of the traders that I know. But I know traders that earn a lot of money. I know traders that earn nothing. I know traders that get heart attacks at 40 because the job is so bad. I know other traders that like it. What's a good job? I don't know. Does it make you happy? Does it pay you well? You wouldn't catch me as a trader. I also know day traders that have lost hundreds of thousands of dollars of their own personal money over the course of a week and millions of dollars over the course of a year. I know other people that have made good money with it. The real key is do what you like. You can't do something you don't like.
Right. And just I couldn't have said it better. Which cloud specialty is the most remote friendly? From my perspective, there's no remote friendly because you have to be client friendly. That requires that maybe one client you have to go on site, introduction, initial interviews, and so forth. And maybe you might not have to go see them for months or years to come, depending on the length of the project, or it might be a client who likes to meet more frequently, or there might be some concerns or some adjustments in the project requiring more on-site interaction. So there's not, because there are each project is like a fingerprint. There's going to be, or a snowflake. There's going to be unique in all its respects. So it's going to require more hands-on, more interaction than others. It all depends on the project. So you got to do what's best for the customer. You may have to fly out, and the more successful you are into becoming a cloud architect, and you're getting up there to becoming a more recognizable, more reliable cloud architect who has more responsibilities, you're going to end up at the airport more often than not. What about you, Mike?
Yeah, that's the key. This is an in-person job. So it's remote, and then you can work from home and you can fly out of any airport that you want. But this is not a remote job. This is not like you can write your software code anywhere you want in the world, which is why it's so easy to outsource a software job to any other country. But architects have to meet with the customer. Half of this job is being with the customer and building relationships, entertaining them. So these aren't really remote jobs.
What skills do I need to say? What skills do we need to say that, yes, I am ready to apply for the cloud architect role?
And we can go to 8:15, but I do want to get to the healthcare one after this. For example, you need to be able to have executive presence. You need to have exceptionally good sales skills. You need to have sufficient business acumen to the level of an MBA. Now, I'm not saying you need an MBA, but you need to have MBA level business acumen skills, because our job is to transform a business. And if you don't know about business to at least an MBA level, you won't be able to design a plan to improve the business. You will need something called CXO relevancy, which is how do you communicate to the CEO versus the CFO versus the CIO. You will need good negotiation skills, because you're going to be good negotiating with your customer. And your presentation skills are going to have to be incredible, because you're going to be presenting to executives, you're going to be presenting to conferences, and you're going to be presenting on the interview even to get hired in the first place. The next set of skills that you need are network, data center, and cloud skills. And please join us on the Thursday Architect webinar, where we'll go over this for a half an hour straight, because you're going to have to be able to combine or move the elements of the data center to the cloud and back and forth and vice versa. So you're going to need to know how to design. You're going to need to lead large teams of engineers, and architects are going to be doing this. You're going to have to be familiar with vendor management, because you're going to be calling all these technology companies. And if I were to ask you right now, how would you design the system for a bank that had, say, a low latency trading application that where a nanosecond of latency could be $10 billion or could be $100 million a year of revenue advantage? And if I were to also tell you that they've got 200,000 people in 12 different countries, and if I were to tell you that they had these kind of security needs, where if they were hacked, it would cause $2 billion of brand damage, if you know how to do that, you're ready to apply for an architect job. But that's an architect job, and you're going to really need training for these things, because no matter how many routers you configure, no matter how many virtual machines you set up, it's not going to teach you how to do those things. But here's the good news. There's a free ebook in the description of this video, which is going to tell you every single skill that you need to know. And while we're at it, we're going to have a free webinar on Thursday where we'll tell you everything you need to know, and you can ask us questions live, and I can even interview you, and we can figure out where you need to go from here.
From Hish, does cloud architect role relevant in hospital settings, since many hospitals prefer data storage solutions or on-prem due to security mainly?
Well, Hish, many hospitals that I've consulted with are on the cloud. We're using the cloud for more than storage. We're using the cloud potentially for disaster recovery. We're using the cloud for flexibility, scalability. We may be using the cloud because the hospital can't afford to buy the systems they need to with capital and may prefer to rent them. But yes, every healthcare organization is using cloud computing. But it will never be a single cloud. It will be a hybrid cloud or a multi-cloud.
If relevant, how would you recommend moving into a role for that? I currently work as an application analyst.
Ish, you're going to need training. Let's say, for example, you were an airplane mechanic and you were building the airplanes. You were fixing the airplane engines. In order to become an airplane pilot, you would need training. Let's say you were a nurse and decided to be a doctor. You'd still have to go to medical school. So you're going to need training. We can easily help you do it. Come to the webinar on Thursday, and we can tell you everything that you're going to need to learn. And you may choose to do it on your own, although I promise you it'll take you years longer and cost you 10 to 20 times more than our training would. But I just want you to get hired no matter what. But you're not going to go from one career to another career without learning how to do the new job. It just doesn't happen that way, except in rare occasions. But I will tell you, and if you actually Google me, Mike Gibbs, the Cisco Medical Grade Network, you can see that I've consulted to most major healthcare organizations throughout the world. Everything from the country of Scotland to basically half of the United States health systems to health systems all over Australia. And I've been consulting in healthcare organizations for technology as an enterprise architect for decades.
From y'all, why do companies complain about the cost of cloud solutions when the majority of these companies have no value management systems in place?
Yeah, here's the reason. So I run an OpenStack cloud with 10 servers. Each server has 24 physical cores, 128 gigs of RAM, and has a 500,000 IOPS each in the drives. I did price this on AWS. Now I bought these servers used and spent $10,000. It was over $11,000 per month in AWS to run something that I spent $10,000 for. So over the course of the 3 years that I'll run my cloud, I spent 10 grand, maybe another $1,000 on electric. It would have cost me $400,000 in AWS. So another example is I recently priced out these big AMD EPYC servers from Dell. They're about $120,000. They cost $16,000 each month to run on the AWS cloud. So over 10 months, it's cheaper to buy it, or 8 months, it's cheaper to buy it from Dell, and over the next 2 years. So in most cases, the cloud is not going to be cheaper. They told everybody it would be cheaper, but it's not cheaper. In many cases, the cloud is substantially more expensive. But, y'all, the cloud is agile. The cloud enables me to spin up a virtual machine in seconds versus weeks. The cloud has capacity that I don't have to think about. I don't have to do capacity planning and engineering around that. So because of these things, y'all, we're going to the cloud, but it's not because it's cheaper. So yes, I expect you're going to see most companies all went to the cloud and said, woohoo, we're going to save money because they were told that by the cloud providers. Then they found out that it didn't. So what are they doing now, y'all? They're not abandoning the cloud. They're going the hybrid cloud path, which is what we advised our clients to do forever. Build a Nutanix or an OpenStack data center, connect that to the AWS cloud, the Azure cloud, the Google cloud, and now that's where the magic's happening. You know, y'all, we know you and we know you well, and y'all, you're pretty special. Everything from, you know, being a chief in the Navy to all these major jobs that you've had in your career and being an exceptional architect. But, you know, that's really the key. The key is the cloud is just not cheaper and organizations have realized it. So yeah, they're getting very expensive, but they also need value management systems too. And they also need better FinOps, but the architectures were often designed by people that didn't really evaluate the business piece. And that's why they're getting less and less techy with the architects, and they want more businessy architects, because you can't be in love with the tech. You got to be in love with the business.
Yeah.
Good.
I laugh because I know of a specific company that is banking a lot of their architecture, and they're still in the they have not set it up at all, and there are so many vulnerabilities to it. And they love the tech, but they don't know how to use it. And I had a talk with a friend of mine who used to work there, and he was saying that they're still in that early stage mode where they don't even know how to handle the root user. So I laughed about that, understanding how dangerous that would be and why the value management system needs to be in place. So good question, y'all.
I don't have a lot of time, but I want to end on Jibstar because I want to protect him from years of wasted time. You want to read this question, Elonzo?
Yeah, given that ChatGPT has the ability to write code, is it still necessary for solution architects to learn and write Linux? Oh, yeah.
So Jibstar, please, I'm begging you for your own career. Please join us on Thursday on the How to Get Your First Cloud Job webinar.
Yes, please.
Jibstar, cloud architects, solution architects never needed to write code, and they don't touch Linux. And that's what part of the reason we had this thing. The cloud architect designs, presents, and sells a technology solution. They negotiate. They present at conferences. They respond to RFIs, RFPs, RFQs. They lead large teams. They entertain their clients and take them to dinner. They work at executive briefings. They write technical and business documentation, but we don't touch the tech in our job. There's no Linux. There's no Terraform. There's no coding whatsoever. I've been an architect forever, and I can introduce you to thousands of architects, and none of them would have ever touched Linux. Now, we might need to know about the Linux kernel, for example, which is not what for example, and we might need to know the way the Linux kernel operates, that there's driver modules, and how the Linux kernel separates the memory from, say, the CPU, because we might be thinking in terms of big data and big compute architectures. But you don't have to know sudo or su minus or yum install or DNF or sudo apt-get install Apache or anything like that. We don't touch the tech. We design it, we present it, we sell it. We don't implement, we don't code, we don't configure. If you try, you will not be allowed to. People that work at these companies we're not allowed to touch the technology. So let's keep it that. So I hope you guys learned a little bit about the architect role. I hope this was a valuable time talking about cloud architect projects. We discussed cloud projects for beginners, cloud computing projects for beginners. We discussed some AWS Solution Architect projects, some cloud career products, some Azure cloud products. Because at Go Cloud Architects and Go Cloud Careers, we really want you to have the absolute best cloud computing career. Every day I've got a student that gets hired, and the next one could be you. Or maybe it's almost every day right now because of the layoffs, but almost every day we're getting somebody that's hired, and we're still getting these exciting notifications. If you're going to do cloud projects, make sure they're projects in your career. Likewise, if you want to be an airplane pilot, don't show projects of the surgery you did when you used to be a doctor, because it's just not going to work.
Yeah.
If you want to be a botanist, awesome. I love botanists. I think it's cool. I love plants and things like that. Don't do projects on oil rigs and put it on your resume, because again, it's not going to be there. And if you want to be a cloud architect or an enterprise architect or an AWS solution architect, do projects. Design some thought leadership. Design a document. Write a book like we did with our students to get them to help build their project list. But do things that position you as an architect and not an engineer. Alonzo, you have anything to say?
Absolutely. It's always a pleasure just being able to get these conversations, and we're here all the time. And joining us on our webinar, you will always get your answers, your questions answered, and even probably have some more to think about after you leave this webinar. So we're always happy to have you, and we're thankful for these questions. We hope you'll be able to give a real deep thought about your cloud architecture development trajectory on what you want to do and how you want to get there. We're always here to help you. Please look to our website at www.gocloudcareers.com. Also look to all our content on YouTube, as well as on LinkedIn. We're always having up-to-date reports, up-to-date conversations and discussions about what we're doing at Go Cloud Careers and how we're able to help you. So we're definitely looking forward to seeing you next time. Have a good evening, morning, or afternoon, wherever you are. And we're looking forward to seeing you next time.
See you next time. And make sure, if you haven't attended, you join our free webinar on Thursday so you know exactly how and everything you need to learn to be a world-class, highly employed, highly paid cloud architect. Have a great night, everybody.
Take care, everyone. It's good to see you again. Until next time.